like to call the meeting to order. Excuse me. So we have some other businesses and so forth. If you could just take a seat and we'll get going. And the first hearing is at 7:15. So, okay. All right, action items. And discussion items. Do you want to just hit the drainage on?
Sure.
Okay, so, just for the commission's information, so I went out to Adams Road last Saturday morning, just observed what was going on and just took a walk of the area. And yeah, there's been a concentration of flow onto the one, whoops, excuse me. Sorry, folks, we're trying to hold a meeting. So, they definitely collected a lot of the street drainage that used to kind of run off dispersed, and they concentrated into this one location, into a pipe that goes on to a couple of, goes into a swale that goes along a couple of properties of lots. And there's definitely erosion happening. There's definitely evidence that that the amount of flow going in there now is significantly changed than what was there before. So I think from our standpoint and from the commission's standpoint, we need to find out what's going on with the town. What are they planning to do? My understanding, based on the abutters out there, is that they actually came out and put plastic in the catch basins to restore the drainage to the old kind of country road, so it disperses it a little bit more, and that has reduced some of the concentrated flow, but that's a temporary measure. So I think from our perspective, because definitely something's going on here, there's definitely erosion going on, we need to reach out to the town and basically have them kind of respond in writing to get everything documented. So I would suggest that we write a very simple letter and let them know the process that we've had in a butter come into the Conservation Commission and ask questions on what this, on what the project is going on and the changes in the stormwater, and how it potentially impacts the order that we issued and so forth. First thing is to find out what the status is, and I know that they're pursuing other avenues, but we need to figure out what is going on now, what's their solution, kind of the timetable, and does the temporary solution, does that work going forward? And so I think just a simple letter requesting them to give an update and either have someone from DPW or have their consultant come in and just explain what they've seen and what the issues are and what they're planning to do, and it's just so that we can have it part of the documentation for the process, so we can figure out what's next steps. So,
Okay.
any questions on that?
Nope.
And it's pretty straightforward that there's a change, and I don't think it was the intention. I took some photos, and there's definitely visible signs of erosion. I mean, there's no question, and it was flowing fairly quickly, and it wasn't even based on, there was three different abutters there at the time, and it wasn't even, you could see the evidence of where it had already flown previously. So let's just find out what's going on and figure out if there's anything that we need to do and what they plan to do, so.
Okay.
So any questions on that? Yeah. Could you, I'm sorry, if you could just step up and give your name and address.
I'm Ethel Jaggy at 34 Adams Road, and Sandra was just talking about our lots on Adams Road. We have been in communication with Tim, and a couple weeks ago he gave a proposal to Brian Kelly's attorney regarding using one of the lots that he has that aren't built on to drop the drainage. We haven't heard anything. It's been probably way over a month since they initially started talking to the attorney to come to some kind of resolution. Honestly, they did cover the inlets, as you had mentioned.
Excuse me, we can't close the door, it's an open meeting.
They covered,
So, sorry, I know it's noisy. If it's noisy out there, I'll go out and tell them they need to either move along and stuff, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
So the town came in and did cover those 13 inlets with plastic, you said, to prevent the water from going down into the drains. And after that, we had substantial rain, so I took a lot of videos. I was from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 9 at night. I took videos showing the drainage on the road that was actually going into those basins and flowing out onto our properties to give them an idea of how much water was
Yep.
actually coming through. When they originally were covering them, I asked the gentleman who was doing it on the road what he was doing. And he said, I don't know, I'm just doing my job. Called the DPW.
Yep.
So I called the DPW, left a message for Brian. Next thing I know, Tim sends an email saying to me and my neighbor saying, oh, we're just covering them up because we want to do some testing to see actually how much water is, coming through. And he said he plans to come out to the site. Never came out to the site, never gave us the test results. That was a couple weeks ago when you had come out to the site. So we sent him an email today asking him for those test results. Honestly, I don't think the town administration is being honest with us at this point about what they're doing and what they plan to do. I don't think they really have an idea of what they're going to do. And we're just waiting for some kind of,
Which is again why we're going to reach out to them, ask them to come in based on that, and see what their response is, and try to from our standpoint, because we have an outstanding permit out there for the order of conditions. We just want to make sure what's being done, if there's changes and things like that, and if they have a proposal out there to do something different, we'd like to know, because it would have to come back in front of us to actually get approved.
yeah.
But if it's a good solution, we'll make sure that's, all those things happen. So, from this perspective, we'll definitely reach out to them and ask someone to come in and give us an update, and do it so that it's documented through the public hearing process.
That would be
So-
great, because we have no idea of what they're doing at this point, and they're giving us very little information.
Yeah.
And I think they're also misleading us. I believe they covered those drains, so, to make sure we're not getting any more water versus them testing it. And I don't think they're gonna open the drains back up because they know that it's an issue on our lots. They don't wanna say that, but they do know it's a problem.
Yeah, and from my perspective, and I understand there's other issues with as far as no easements and those type of things, that's a little bit outside of our jurisdiction.
Right.
What's not outside of our jurisdiction is the fact that they concentrated the flow and they're causing erosion and they're causing issues onto the property. So we're gonna try to address that, and we'll do that through the public process.
Yeah, one more thing I just wanna, that I came across today with my neighbor was, she got a letter from an insurance company regarding coming out and assessing the damage to the property. And she's not sure if that's coming from the town or where it's coming from. So she's just,
That I would just, like anything else, be smart about it. I have no idea where that's coming from.
okay.
It has nothing to do with us, but.
That may be something you might come across. I mean, if they're sending out insurance appraisers or adjusters to see what's going on with her property, with her well.
Yeah, that I don't know. That I have no idea. So I
Okay.
don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
But, and again, what we're going to be really concentrating on is finding out where they're at right now, find out what the, solution could be, and what's the process to get there.
Okay.
And so,
Hopefully we can get some time frame around it.
yes, yep. All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Sandy.
Real quick, how many properties or how many lots are being affected by this?
It's actually 3
Just three,
that's being affected by it,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, great. All right, so it's now 7:15, so we'll jump right in. Okay. Pursuant to the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, the Grafton Wetlands Protection Bylaw, the Grafton Stormwater Management Bylaw, Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing to act upon a notice of intent, application for Grafton Wetlands Protection Bylaw permit, and application for Grafton Stormwater Management Bylaw permit for the construction of a 39-lot subdivision at 88 Adams Road in Grafton. Okay, please.
Madam Chair, my name is James Tatro. I work for Thompson Liston Associates here representing Casa Builders.
One thing before we get going.
Got it.
Okay, keep on going. If anyone wanted to know that, we were just looking for a check for the legal ad, so it's a little paperwork that we wanted to take care of before we started the presentation. For folks who have never been to a public hearing like this, so the process is pretty straightforward. We'll hear from the applicant first. After the applicant gives their presentation, the commission will then ask questions, After we go through that, I'll then open up to the public, and the public has to ask has the opportunity to ask questions. Just remember, this is the Conservation Commission, so we really are concentrated on impacts to the wetlands, anything to do with stormwater. We're really not going to get into things like the number of lots and so forth. All of that is done through the planning board. So if you're here, you probably really also want to be looking for your notices on when the planning board hearing is. So we're not going to talk about traffic. We're not talking about anything else. We're really concentrated on impacts to the wetlands, what's under the Wetlands Protection Act, and under the stormwater permit for Grafton. So those are things we'll be chatting about. So please go ahead.
And just to tag along with what the chair said, we had one planning board meeting already, and they didn't want to have a second meeting until we had had a Conservation Commission meeting. So there won't be additional, you won't receive a certified mail notice of the next planning board hearing. You should look at the website and/or contact them. Just so you know, there won't be another notice going out.
Correct.
Again, we're here for the Ridings, which is proposed open space subdivision on a 69 and change acre parcel of land, which has access at 88 Adams Road onto Adams Road. Also is bounded to the south by the Mass Turnpike, to the east side by other land owned by Casa and Casa Builders. And through that land would connect to the existing end of Harvest Way in Westboro. The land goes, again, I mentioned about being bounded on the south by the Mass Turnpike, on the west by abutters homes along Adams Road, and to north reaches just above this to the land of La Flamme. And this land right now is all wooded. It has had existing trails before we also went in. We've conducted soil testing. Again, it's all wooded. The high point of this hill is over here on the Westboro side. It drains down to a wetland that you see represented in a little darker green here, and that wetland flows south to a huge culvert under the Mass Pike. There's also another culvert under the Mass Pike almost near the town line. The town line between Grafton and Westboro is the red line on this plan. The Westboro side is also going to be an open space subdivision, and the intention is that the open space of 32 acres here on the north end of this development be combined essentially with a 40-acre open space parcel in the Westboro side, and then actually touches a couple of other parcels. That there's one, it's Libby and New England Forestry, if I get them right, which taken all three together would comprise, it's almost 300 acres, because the other two have almost 200 acres now, and this is about 80 acres total for the two sides. There are also some open space parcels on the south of both sides. But I want to just emphasize that while we're proposing a 39-lot subdivision, open space subdivision in Grafton, it requires, and is to be built along with, a subdivision in Westboro, because the access to this land is from over here at Adams Road at 88, and off the existing end of Harvest Way. And as I said, this is all wooded land, drains down to a wetland here, which flows to the culvert into the Mass Pike, and we need to cross that wetland in order to connect the two sides. With just a 500-foot long cul-de-sac here, stopping short of the wetlands, and the maximum use that you could do over here, which actually is really just one lot. If you did not make a crossing, you would only have, I don't know, 4 or 5 lots out as compared to 58 on the two sides, 39 on Grafton, and 19 on Westboro. We believe we're crossing at the narrowest point. We're proposing a open bottom box culvert, which actually won't rest on any of the wetland there. I think maybe just at the end of it. But we're counting all of this 948 square feet as being altered. We're proposing a replication area of about a 2.5 to 1 ratio from 2,400 square feet. So again, I just want to emphasize in the big picture, yes, we are coming before you for the ridings in Grafton, but a necessary component of the overall development is the ridings in Westboro. And its need to connect the two sides, again, access here at Adams Road and here at Harvest Way that requires the crossing, and for which we're asking for a limited project crossing to be accepted by the commission. The wetland boundaries were previously the subject of an ANRAD issued back in, I think it was 2014, if I get that correct. We actually have that, all the area near the crossing flagged up right now. After we filed, we had our survey field crew go out and re-flag those spots, because after a few years, the flags, I think they said were able to find some knots, but that was about it. None of the hanging flags themselves were still there. I want to emphasize, too, that we've already done all the soil testing for these lots. I think there's 1 or 2 lots at the end of the cul-de-sac here we're going to have to retest because the cul-de-sac end was reconfigured pursuant in the preliminary process with the planning board. But we've already tested all of these lots, and that testing basically confirmed the soil mapping from the MassGIS Oliver site or the USDA or USGS site, which said that this is all Paxton series soil, that you had, I think it was ridge, which is hydrosoil group C, you had some ridgeberry, you had some, right here, it said some Chatfield Hollis, which is a kind where you see a lot of boulders and ledge, and we did see some boulders and ledge in that area. And over here, it actually, I think this is the first time I've seen this, it just labeled this as, quote, gravel pits, which soil-wise is a very good thing to see, and that's why actually we propose that the drainage for this site, this road is going to go a very slight uphill away from Adams Road. Then from a local high point over here, it's going to go down to a low point just past the crossing. Excuse me, let's find it about here. Then this is all uphill into Westboro, and in fact, the very top of the road is over here, over in Westboro. And this road goes downhill, the short cul-de-sac Olive Circle to the main road, Stinson Road. Randolph Circle, this longer cul-de-sac has a high point about here. This part drains into the main road, and the rest of this drains down to the end. And all of this drainage, all of this street in Grafton, in all of this street, and the beginning of this are collected and are sent over here. We've got a large infiltration basin proposed. And that's because that's where we had great soil. That was the place where we could infiltrate runoff. Again, this road, Randolph Circle, this cul-de-sac, the end from, I think it's about 150 feet in to the end, is going to go to a regular detention basin that's going to discharge higher up on this wetland. I know this is a big issue because I was heard the testimony earlier, and I was just talking to the resident from down at number 34, and I want to just emphasize about the drainage that right now, you've got, try to find the contour here. You've got a 442 contour right here, so you actually have, and this is draining downward this way, and from the back of this lot at number 94 and downward this way. And we're not going to change that. The backs of these lots, where they drain now, will still be draining away from them. We're not directing any water to any of these folks, or either the folks further south, Underwood, Reinhardt, and Smith. We're collecting everything, discharging it to the existing wetland, and that flows to the culvert under the Mass Pike. And that's where that water goes now, because the raindrop that falls even over here in Westboro right now goes downhill to this wetland, flows down to that same culvert. So we're not changing the drainage pattern, and we're not changing anything as far as, again, relative to the discussion earlier, we're not making a sort of a sheet flow across a property line anywhere, a concentrated point. We're not sending anybody water who's not getting water now, because frankly, it all goes to the Mass Pike, and it's still going to go to the Mass Pike. So I just wanted to emphasize that point, especially given the discussion. So the other points I think I want to emphasize are, we filed the stormwater report checklist. I think we're adhering to all of the 10 standards. We included an operation and maintenance both construction phase and post-construction phase in that. We are gonna reduce total suspended solids through the use, I actually should have pointed out also, we have a small detention basin here. I think I misrepresented things earlier. I said all this was going to this detention basin. Actually, most of this small cul-de-sac and 100 and change feet of the main road actually are going to this one at the corner of Olive Circle and the main road, because actually this was some more very good soils, and we were trying to get the maximum use out of this one. I should point out also that we first were filing with the planning board, and the town planner pointed out, said, you know, you are using a 6.5-inch 100-year storm. You're supposed to be using the Cornell storm, which, what was it, 8.79 inches, and we revised the drainage, but this basin was so big, actually in the initial design, we actually didn't change anything in this basin. So we were very lucky.
So
that-
just a quick question, those basins that you're talking about, is that in the area where it used to say gravel pits?
Yes,
Have you found any tailings, and did you find evidence that it was actually mined?
we didn't see anything that anything would constitute fill. I don't know if, it was our suspicion that it had been mined just because of the, it just seemed, the
unnatural topography?
yeah, it seemed that it was oddly low. It seemed to us that it should have been higher at some point. And again, maybe we're inferring that from the designation on the map saying gravel pits. It just,
I would do just a simple thing, use UNH's historical USGS maps,
Oh.
and just look back 50, 100 years and see if there was actually what was there then. That'll give you an indication of whether or not, how much the area has been altered.
well, we did a couple of deep holes in that basin area. So our depth to seasonal high groundwater is from modeling in that basin area, and the texture is from what we found. So we did do tests on the spot. And again, as I said earlier, I would say that our soil testing for all the septic systems really did pretty well confirm the descriptions or depictions at the MassGS Oliver site and the USGS site, as far as, you know, what you had on site. Which, I mean, this is kind of a classic drumlin shape, sort of a north-south oriented hill. You would have expected it to be a till here, and you know, as a Paxton it was. And you did get a little lesser quality of material over here at the very sort of northwest corner of things. Everything did fit, and again, we did, with the exception of a couple lots that we have to redo now, we did get passing soil tests on every lot. And this property is going to be served by town water. We did a hydrant flow and pressure test in front of number 86. And actually, we were very pleasantly surprised at how much pressure there was. This site is actually, we are, I think, meeting the infiltration guideline under the DP Stormwater Management Standards. And actually, we're going to get more than that as a natural function of this, because town water is going to be discharged into septic system. So, I mean, we're not counting that as part of our, looking at the stormwater checklist, what are you infiltrating? But as a practical matter, that is what's going to happen. I guess just briefly, I'd say, we were in front of the planning board, went through the whole preliminary review process, showing that, showing both an open space and conventional subdivision. It was both the board's preference for the open space and the applicant's, which in Grafton, the applicant has a choice of doing the open space or conventional subdivision. In Westboro, actually, it's the planning board that decides whether it's an open space or conventional subdivision, but they also wished to have the open space subdivision. Again, looking at combining 30 acres of open space here with another 40 in Westboro and joining two other parcels, which together have about 200. Everybody was interested in having that. And just as a Another point, I just want to note that none of the Westboro drainage is coming into Grafton. I mean, there'll be a little bit of the street here that is going to just keep going across the town line before it's picked up by catch basins. But there are not drainage connections between the two. There are not water connections between the two. There's going to be a hydrant on each side. And in some really scary apocalyptic situation, I think they could theoretically put make a connection between the two hydrants, but you'd hesitate to do it otherwise. But there won't, in general, there won't be utility overlap or overlap of infrastructure between the two towns. You know, Grafton is gonna take a little bit of road, again, right here, but no other drainage from Westboro. Westboro's not taking anything from Grafton. I know there's other things that I wanted to just mention, again, in a big picture sense, the overall site is a rough material balance. That material balance is from a net cut of material from the Westboro side to a net fill on the Grafton side. And it is roughly where I just put my hand. The biggest cut in Westboro is where I've got my hand over it. And the biggest fill in Grafton is, again, where I've got my hand. So material is going to move from here to here in the construction process. It's not going to be trucked away from either Grafton or Westboro. It's going to stay interior. And the phasing that we're proposing is that the first phase of construction is the main road, Stinson Road, and Harvest Way is this connection. The second phase is the two cul-de-sac. And that is because, again, the material balance required, in order to have more than a 500-foot dead end, you have to connect all the way through. And to make this necessary fill in here, you have to take this cut from here. So the first phase of construction is the main road and the connection to Harvest Way. The second phase of construction would be the two cul-de-sac in Grafton. I guess I'll leave it at that. I'm sure there's other things that will come up as questions or that I'm forgetting in the moment, but I'll try and answer your questions.
Sure, so from a standpoint of a low-impact design, what are you proposing? Say you have really good soils.
Yep.
What are all the different things that you're doing to have a more natural-based system?
Well, we're doing infiltration as much as possible. We
You're
are
concentrating, how are you doing a low-impact design?
by having the open space subdivision, we're having smaller lots.
We're talking stormwater.
Yep.
Are you doing roof infiltration?
Yes, to the extent possible, and I don't have the number of lots. If you look on the plans, you'll see, for instance, on lot number 22 here, you have in the backyard, 23 in the backyard, 4, 5, 6, 7. Basically, because this is a till material with a relatively high, typically like a 36-inch depth to seasonal high groundwater, we're infiltrating roof runoff on all the lots where there is fill. But on a lot where, for instance, number 17 here on this side where it is cut, we didn't think it was really practical to propose roof infiltration on that lot. So we don't have dry wells proposed on the cut lots on the uphill side of the road, but we do on all the downhill side lots. And you'll see more also on the lots that have fill on the downhill side of the main road. And we also have a couple of these lots also, yes, there as well. We did propose it on all the lots where we believe it was feasible. And one other quick thing I wanted to mention while I'm looking here at lot number 34 is we think, with the exception of the crossing, we think we have respected the town bylaw buffer of 25 feet. And we actually, to achieve that in the back of number 34, we actually proposed a low retaining wall. So.
And as far as just continuing on the stormwater, and so you're not using anything like gravel wetlands, bioretention, anything else that are natural-based systems?
No, we're using the infiltration at the two spots where the soils we think are appropriate, and actually are very appropriate for it. But because in the other areas things were a till, and because we also have septic systems that we're required to install, and you have a minimum setback from septic systems for infiltration. It's another somewhat of a restriction in that regard, even on the other down the lots. For instance, let's find a good example.
Just to keep things going, what are you using to treat your water quality? What are the, what
Sure.
systems are you using? All gray?
We've got, of course, deep sump catch basins. Everything is going through through CDS stormwater filter units and the infiltration units. Actually, the infiltration basins, I should say.
So
and-
you're using all gray infrastructure to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. One other quick item, procedurally, we had a call from Megan Philby at DEP earlier today, and she said, you know, gee, where is the progress of this, where do you stand? And I said, well, we're gonna have a meeting tonight. I said, but we certainly expect more than one meeting, and she said, okay, so I don't have to be in a rush to get out a file number to you. I said, no, we understand there's gonna be, you know, more than one meeting here, so we don't have a file number yet, but that's where it stands, is that she might have been able to
Yeah, we
issue
don't
it.
have peer review done and a bunch of
Right.
other things, so, are you all set?
I think so.
Any other questions from the commission?
In terms of the elevation, so that's a
Yeah.
pretty big hill in the main, whatever we're calling that main road. What's that difference? It's hard to tell from the map, topography of the map.
Well, you wanna, what is this, from the low point of the road?
Yeah, roughly. How much are we
Let
talking?
me see if I can find the number. Okay, so you got 430, call it 436 at the low point. I'm sure I'm just a little off. When you get up to the intersection with Harvest Way, you're at 520, 528 and change. So 436 to 528, so that's 64, that's 92 feet in elevation, and what that is in 2,200, so it's 1,700 feet to go that 90-foot rise. I think we have a maximum 7% slope on this. We weren't asking for any waivers on either side from slope restrictions. But yeah, it is, I mean, and if you go further up the hill, you're, somewhere here you hit the 70, 80, 90, 600, you're in the 600s at the peak of the hill.
And you said where's the runoff from the Westboro side? Where's that going?
Sure. It's a couple different ways. Much of it actually goes to the wetland that's over here.
Okay.
On the, I guess you say north or east side of Harvest Way. That flows through a culvert that goes, you see a bit of a green edging here. This is wetland. That culvert, the flow from it goes through a wetland here and goes to another, there's two culverts under the Mass Pike, two similarly sized granite culverts. One is just to the Grafton side of this town line. It's probably about here. And again, the other one is over here. So most of the Westboro site goes actually to that wetland, through the culvert, through the wetland, and then down to the big culvert into the Mass Pike. Again, it's kind of a oval-shaped peak to it and contours. Much of it actually is coming into the Grafton side, and is going to go through this open space, and that's why. Oh, so I'm glad you raised it. You notice on the back of these lots, numbers 18 through 21. You see a dark line here. This is hatching, indicating a very wide swale that's proposed. We were debating to try and pick this up with a series of drop-inlet catch basins, but we just made it a very large and wide swale to protect, if you will, the backyards of these lots and direct the runoff coming down the hill to that detention basin.
And then in terms of moving of the earth from the Westboro side down to
Yeah.
that southern portion there, is that going on both sides of the road?
Yes.
Is it, okay. And then,
Just quickly, try to find a number. This is 4. This is 450 right now, and it's proposed to be 460, this is about 463 or 464. This is 14 feet high, and that's the need to get across the wetland without making this excessively high, and then get up this hill. And it requires starting to rise upward before the topography is actually rising. It's relatively flat here, we're rising, and then we can't match the intensity of this rise or the steepness of this rise naturally, but we're still quite a fill here, and you end up in a cut further up the hill.
So in terms of the backyards of those houses, I guess on either side, they're going to be fairly elevated above wetlands on either side,
There would
right?
be walkout backs, there's no wetland on this side, there is wetland on this side, but there would be walkout back
Right.
setups of the houses such that the backyard is, is seven and change to 8 feet lower than the front yard
Mhm.
in each of these cases. And these septic systems are, in the front yards and these lots, these big fields, are frankly gonna be on a tremendous amount of sand.
Mhm.
Title V says you can't have a septic system component more than 3 feet below the surface. If you're filling 14 feet there in the road, then that septic system is gonna be on a tremendous column of sand, and it's just gonna have to be an expensive septic system, there's no way around it.
And then between the southern portion of that and the turnpike or Mass
Yeah.
Pike, so it's not technically wetlands, but that's going to have fairly significant runoff, I would think, right, between the two culverts? 'Cause
I
you
don't
got
know,
every,
because it's only gonna get the backyards of these lots. The rest of it is draining into the road. So I don't think it's actually gonna be a significant change from right now, because this area, right now, it does have some, you could draw up a little sort of long pie-shaped contributing area to what gets here. But again, most of the hill flows into this wetland and then down. This is just, again, sort of narrow swaths of the hill that are getting to this area, to that wetland in
it's
particular.
still going to be a bit of a gully, though. I'm assuming the Mass Pike at that portion is going to be elevated higher,
It is.
so in between the
Yes.
two. So okay. And then in terms of the Grafton water, you said they get good water pressure there. Is there a pumping station going in to get the water up the hill?
No, actually, and I'll get the numbers wrong, but on both sides, to our very pleasant surprise, we had, one of them was like 100 PSI, the other was 90 PSI. I forget which one was which. They were both very strong, such that even you take that and look at the highest house, you should have more than adequate pressure, even with the drop for the distance and the drop for the friction.
Okay. And then which side is going to be used as the construction entrance?
I don't know that I could say that either side is gonna be exclusively the construction entrance.
I'm not familiar with the Westboro side,
Yeah.
but just knowing the Grafton side and knowing
Yeah.
Adams Road is obviously not a
I can
a
tell you
large road,
this is easier to drive in.
right? I'm
because-
just talking in terms of the heavy equipment coming in,
Yeah.
and I mean Adams Road, will, town's going to end up having to replace that again.
This would be,
For too long.
this is easier to drive in, and I know that the discussion with the folks in Westboro was just that they didn't want a trucking route, material leaving here, and they were relieved to find again that you're essentially taking material from here to there. But I don't think it has been planned necessarily as either side being anything sort of an exclusive route. I think it would depend upon where a vehicle is coming from.
Does the planning board mention anything about that in terms of?
Um,
Because I'm more concerned with
Yeah, I don't-
obviously with the heavier equipment going on Adams Road, which is not I wouldn't say it's a high quality road in terms of the construction. It just the heavy equipment's going to rip that up before long.
One other item, I wasn't gonna bring this up because it's kind of a planning board side item, is in the discussion with them in the preliminary process, we looked at, you have sort of a local high point right here, and we were asked to commit to lowering that 1 foot to improve sight distance of somebody who's coming out here looking to the north. But I have to say that there really wasn't any much discussion about one access versus the other. I think at this point, the plan is to use both. Frankly, I would more encourage people to use the Harvest Way access because it's simply easier to get a large vehicle in there as opposed to turning on Adams. But there hasn't been any commitment either way to either town.
Then one other question. In terms of the housing, and I just, only because I haven't seen that yet, what type of housing is going on? Obviously, single-family homes,
Single-family homes.
town water, but,
Yep, and the Westboro side has sewer. The lots on the Grafton side are actually, the lots are a little bigger because one of the odd things about the Westboro equivalent of the open space bylaw is that it restricts you can't have a lot more than 15,000 square feet. And that's how they achieve getting a certain amount of open space. Whereas the Grafton bylaw, which I think is better, says you're gonna give us at least 40% of your land. Actually, we would be giving 62%, but you're gonna give us at least 40% of your land, and then it has sort of restrictions within that of what your average lot size must be, et cetera. And the average lot size is, I think it was just over 20,000 square feet. So the lots are actually gonna be larger in Grafton than in Westboro. We're showing the same size house, which again is just a stand-in as a theoretical reasonable one of 70 by 36 on all these lots, both in Westboro and in Grafton.
so what's your typical square foot for the house?
Oops, I had
Roughly.
it before. And there was a point of discussion too in the Westboro side where, so 2,520 square foot footprint. There was some discussion worrying that these houses would not be up to par with these, and we're actually able to show, because we had done the as-built of the foundation of some of these houses, that actually, that's almost exactly the same size houses, some of the people who said they were worried that these houses would not be up to snuff with theirs.
So,
I can say it'll at least be a comparable home.
anything else, Scott?
Nope.
So, a couple of things. You don't have an erosion control plan, separate plan in here.
Now, we have it on the grading plane, if we can certainly, if it's,
For me, it's all the things that aren't shown on here. That question is your slope stabilization. I think on one of them it shows an entrance and so forth, but there's not a lot of detail. All you have is perimeter fencing and a couple of random areas of settling basins. So a little bit more detail on what's going on with erosion control, what you have, details and things like that. How you're gonna, you've got large cuts here. I mean, you've got, this is a cut or a fill. Let's see here. That's a cut.
the bigger are the fills on the Grafton side.
Yeah. Well, this one's a big cut, so, it's a 24, 30-foot cut, and I know you have 2-foot contours, so it's hard for me to tell. I guess 2 to 1, 3 to 1?
We have some of both.
Okay, so what are you doing for slope stabilization? You know,
Well, in the details, we do show that slope steeper than 3 to 1 would be either riprap or they'd be an erosion control blanket rated for use on, actually overshooting it for a 2 to 1 slope, rated for use on a 1 to 1.
so, yeah, I guess I'm usually, I'm used to seeing those locations identified on the plans. I guess that's my thing is sitting here looking at this, I don't want to guess what's what, because there's quite a bit of cuts and fills, as you've been noting. And so obviously, one really critical component that we want to look at is erosion control, protection of the wetlands, understanding how it is. And right now, you just have a perimeter control and some very steep slopes. And so it's just like, what else are you going to be doing there? You know, what kind of, I was looking at the details as the different erosion control, but do you need, because of the amount of exposed areas that you have, do you need to do rows along the slopes themselves, because they're quite long? So if you're taking C-till soils from Westboro and pulling it in here, and you're having relatively poor high silt content, high fine content, and you're putting a 30-foot, 25-foot slope, and you're not protecting it, that's gonna cause problems. So those are the things that we'd be looking for, and having a detail that says, hey, we're gonna put some fabric down, maybe is not enough, depending upon the length of the slopes, and obviously just follow engineering standard practice as far as whether you need wing rows and those type of things on those type of slopes. Do you have any questions, or? You're just taking it in for you.
Taking it in.
Okay, so to let everyone know, this is the first presentation to us as a board, and so I'll give you a little rundown on kind of the next things that will happen. So we ask our kind of initial questions, but really a lot of the things that we'll have done that we rely on is we have outside peer consultants. And so we will actually send this set of plans out to an engineering firm that will look at all the stormwater and everything else. And we also, I think you mentioned at the beginning that the wetland delineation needs to be updated. So we will have a peer reviewer, we'll have a wetland scientist go out and review that line also to make sure that when we say that it is, the wetland lines are delineated correctly, we have an outside expert that helps us, okay? A couple of things about this particular project, and probably the biggest thing as far as the Conservation Commission goes in our findings, whenever we look at a project, we have to do a series of findings. The biggest finding here is the fact that it's a limited project. So a limited project allows a property owner to access their upland area so they can develop. This is, it's basically if you own a piece of property, you own the right to develop it. So there are exceptions within the Wetlands Protection Act to allow property owners to access that upland area. So one of the biggest findings is whether this is really a limited project. So we'll probably be looking to our peer reviewer to make sure they really look at that hard, because it makes a very big difference on this. It is something that's right in the Wetlands Protection Act, and it's a specific finding as a commission we have to make when we're reviewing these plans. So that's kind of a big thing. This is our introduction. I think you've already heard the applicant indicate that this will be continued. So once they open the public hearing, and we talked a little bit about this at the very beginning, once we open the public hearing, you receive a notification that says we're having a public hearing on this day at this time, things like that. When we can most likely continue the hearing tonight, we will continue it to a date certain, which means you will not get another notification. So like this one here, we may say we're going to do 2 weeks or to the first meeting in June. I don't know what it's going to be at this time. So just remember, if you're not here or you miss a meeting, you can always check with our office and check the town website and look at the calendar to make sure when the next meetings are. You can also do that, obviously, with any other of the planning board or any other boards that they're going to go in front of. So at this time, I'm going to open it up, and if you have questions, this is the time to ask for it. We're just at the beginning, and we still have a lot of information that we need to gather. Obviously, everything that is discussed is during the public hearing process. The commission, we do not do any deliberation or anything else outside of this process. So this is the time, if you have any questions, whether it's like you happen to be in a butter and you want to know where the stormwater's going or something like that, or you're concerned about the wetlands or anything like that, here's a time, please come on up, just give your name and address and ask the question, and we'll kind of direct it and get some of those questions answered. So feel free, anyone who wants to ask some questions. Right up to the, well, you can actually go to the desk also. We just need to be a microphone
Yep.
because we are on camera.
Okay.
And so just name and address.
Brian Smith, 107 Adams Road.
Yep.
We have a couple of concerns with the wetlands that are on our property that are across the street from some of this development, because there's water that runs from the hill down across the street and dumps into our wetlands. So we're concerned that it's going to raise the water table in our wetlands, which is already higher than it's ever been.
Yeah, that's a different issue,
So
but I understand your
just wanted
question.
to show it on the map if I could.
Oh, apps, please do,
One that
yes.
she just had up there.
Yep.
So this wetlands here is all part of the property that we have.
Okay,
Between, there's actually a stream that runs down here and comes onto Adams Road. That's 106, that's the O'Connor's house. And some of it runs into the catch basin. Those catch basins, the 6 catch basins through here dump onto our wetlands.
gotcha.
So anything that runs down the hill into the catch basins ends up in our wetlands. Then there's a stream that runs between 100 and 98, and it actually floods 98 Adams Road's basement. They have a sump pump that runs almost constantly.
Okay,
That pumps into that stream bed, and that runs under the road and into our wetlands. And then there's another one between 98 and 96 that comes down off this hill. So when they start working up here and building up here, my concern is the runoff from the roofs, the roads, the driveways, the sidewalks, Now there's not ground up there to absorb it, it's all gonna be faster moving with less absorption, and it's gonna run down these stream beds and end up in our wetlands. Our wetlands now have gone almost up to our shed. Our side yard, where our shed is over here, we used to be able to walk on it in May or June. We can't walk on it. Last year, we couldn't even go over there and mow because it was so wet, you would leave a footprint, and it's even worse now.
Yeah.
So this winter, the frost heaves actually moved our shed 6 or 8 inches up into the air because the water table is so high back there.
Yeah, it's been a wet season, and we didn't have a lot of snow, but we had a lot of precipitation.
So our concern is
Yep.
less area for absorption and more speed to the
Yep.
water with the roofs and the sidewalks. And we wanna make sure that there's some way to make sure that they're gonna prevent any excessive water coming down the natural flow that's already there, which is gonna flood us even more. That's our concern.
And that is an absolutely legitimate concern, and one of the things that the Wetlands Protection Act and the stormwater standards are supposed to do is to mitigate that. Now, that's what it's supposed to do. So we hire that external engineer to review that, and so they're looking at that. In addition to the DEP stormwater standards in our local bylaw and our stormwater, is that they have to mitigate volume also. So one of the things that you should be concerned about is exactly what you said, which is you increase the impervious area, you prevent water from going into the ground, or you prevent it from what's called evapotranspiration for the plants to actually uptake it.
Yep.
You eliminate all of that. Not only does it come off faster, more of it comes off.
Right.
So it's that volume
It's
component.
higher volume
Yep.
and faster as well,
You
because
got
there's
it.
less ground to absorb the
Yeah,
the
so
water.
that's kind of what that stormwater management system is all about. And we do actually go out and get a peer review and rely on their process to go through to make sure it meets DEP stormwater standards and also meets our local stormwater bylaw.
All right, so the town doesn't have its own engineer, you hire an outside company?
We go, yes, so we go to a peer review. Our peer review is Graves Engineering.
Okay.
So they, unless there's a conflict or something, they do all our peer review, so they know our
If
stuff.
they're gonna come out and assess this situation, I would like them to come out and look at Adams Road where the water runs down, so they can see the flow that's coming down the hill into our
Yep.
wetlands now.
I would make a suggestion for you, and I make this all the time to abutters and so forth. Write a letter and actually send it to us, so it gets part of the it's part of the record. It's easier for us to give that information to our peer reviewer if it's just written down.
Okay.
So, yeah, if you do that, it helps us document
Yeah,
things.
that's our big concern, because we're already
Yep.
losing part of our yard because of the high water table, and it's been that way for a couple of years
It's gonna
now.
continue to change, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's our concern, is the
Yeah.
water runoff that's already existing is gonna be worse.
Hopefully, our role is to not let that happen.
Okay.
But just because we say that and have best intentions, we need to make sure we have outside help doing that also.
Okay.
All right, great,
Very
thank
good.
you.
Is your wetland draining towards the south and then underneath the Mass Pike as well, or is there
No,
another exit?
it actually runs into this wetlands here.
Yeah.
I believe this is all part of the Laflamme property.
Okay.
And this is all wet over here now.
Right.
I go out and walk it, there's no space here that's not wet. And the farm field and the wetlands here and the wetlands that are on our property actually run together, and the water actually goes in a circle. It comes in here, goes over to here, and then down here, and then back to the lower part of this wetlands.
So it's just it's a low spot,
That's the lowest spot, and this whole area of Adams Road is right here.
which is why there's a large wetlands there.
Right.
You got it.
So our concern is all the water runoff, because the existing catch basins, I think there's 6 or 8 of them on the road that were installed in '99, and most of those dump into that wetlands. There's a pretty good sized pipe.
Yep.
There's also a pipe where the stream comes between 100 and 98, and it's an old concrete pipe.
Yep.
And it goes right onto the wetlands as well.
Okay, no, that's great. And that type of detail is great to give to our peer reviewer if it's just in a letter. I'm not sure if it shows up on the applicant's plans, depending, I was just looking at them, I'm not sure it does the whole Adams Road, but
Yep.
that type of localized information is really good to give to the peer reviewer. So
All right.
appreciate that, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions? And as I said before, this won't be the last hearing we have, but it's the one that we're trying to find out information and so forth, so. All right, so let's kind of recap. Obviously, we still have our peer review outstanding, so we have both the wetland delineation and the stormwater and just general bylaw kind of review that needs to go on. You know, obviously, we'll get a little bit more into the plans. Also, I'd like to see if you have any other ideas for doing some, in our stormwater bylaw, we talk about that we like to promote nature-based systems, that we like to do LID. There's not a lot of that on here. When you take, infiltration is great, but when it's centralized, it's not an environmental benefit. It, you know, it has a benefit, but it's really, it's more, you know, where it lands, goes into the ground, is more natural hydrological cycle. That is definitely not happening here, so anything that you can do, whether it's the roof drains that go into infiltration systems, even if it's marginal soils, you may want to think about doing that, because even though in the spring that might not work, but you've probably got 9 other months that might work. So, you know, obviously it's about, you know, making sure you have disconnected pavement, that you have an opportunity to allow the water into the vegetation. Now, I know that this is, you know, a subdivision plan, and you're showing rectangles for houses with a single driveway. You should really pay attention to what you're using for amount of imperviousness on each lot. One of the conditions we'll do is that whatever it is in your stormwater report is what you have to follow. So if you want to have the opportunity to have larger driveways, add something to it, or decks or something else, make sure you capture that in your stormwater management system now. Because if you don't, we're gonna ask a question, or when they come in for individual permits, there's gonna be an allowance for every lot. It's just making sure that you capture what the actual, I mean, if you're over, we don't care. But, you know, that type of thing.
Sure, and just as an aside, you mentioned the peer review. I know I had spoken to Jeff Walsh of Graves Engineering, who asked me for a specific document. I know he started reviewing on the planning board side.
Yep, and we do, it's the same peer reviewer for both, so yeah, so those type of things, we just want to be consistent. And then the other thing that we'll definitely be looking for is, you have a little bit about this in here, about a phasing. Again, this goes back to erosion control, is we typically use a rule of thumb of no more than 5 acres at a time being open. And so we want to make sure that you open a certain amount of area, that it gets stabilized before you move on. We've had not good experiences when people come in and clear cut everything and want to do a lot of earth moving, and they haven't really stabilized the site, or they're doing too much and they can't keep up with the erosion control. We've had some bad experiences from that, so we try to avoid that and phase things.
One of the things I should note is since the time we filed this, we had some discussions with informally with the Westboro Conservation Commission, and we're just about to file with them, and one of their requests, and that's not yet reflected on these plans, was us giving them a interim grading plan showing that, because similarly, as you just said, they didn't want all of this open at once, and what we worked up was a plan, because the end of this is actually a fill, was how some of this would be cut, that would be fill, had to be stabilized before any other could be cut in here, and actually we've gone partway to working up similarly for the Grafton side, how some of this would be filled and temporary settling basins would be installed above that, and how some of the rest of it, which is intended to be filled, would at least initially be left alone, so that more stabilization of the first phase of work, of very first steps, I guess I should say, of the fill work were done. So we have been looking into that, and we actually have gotten instruction toward that end from the Westboro side. So it is going to be on, but we thought we were going to be in here before this meeting, or we might have already tried to send revised plans to you, but we are going to show that on subsequent plans.
Yeah, we want a construction sequencing plan and a phasing plan, so that we can, and that will be put into the order of conditions about that process. You also are showing that that the open space is going to be turned over to Sudbury Valley trustees. Do you have an
Correct.
agreement in place on doing that, or is it just a?
There's not a formalized agreement, but Steve Sloan of Sudbury Valley Trustees was attending all of the planning board meetings.
Okay.
And it's not just a speculative thing on the part of the applicant. He's had a lot of discussions with them, and they indicated their interest in taking ownership of this parcel. In fact, they also had discussions with the adjacent open space parcel on the Westboro side, and I think the way it has been left at this point is the town of Westboro wants to, Conservation Commission wants to maintain or keep official ownership of it, but they're actually gonna have Sudbury Valley trustees, in effect, maintain it, if you will.
So they'll do a conservation restriction,
Yeah.
and then Sudbury Valley trustees will be actually the holder of the conservation restriction. So that's the way that works. We're fine if, as obviously the planning board, you have to go through this, and that you have to designate who's gonna have the open space, and Sudbury Valley trustees is fine by me. I just wanted to make sure that we understand what's happening with the
Yep.
open space, and that open space cannot be developed in the future. So,
We understand.
having said that, hopefully everyone got a little bit smarter about this particular project. Again, we're gonna, basically gonna ask the applicant now if he wants to continue this. Since you don't have a DEP number, you have no choice. We can't close a hearing without a DEP number.
Having no choice, Madam Chair, I would request that we please have it continue.
And if you want to get picky, some people will not open a hearing if you don't have it, but that's okay. So, so when would you like to continue it to?
I guess what are the options you mentioned about, 2 weeks out or a meeting in June? I'm not sure that 2 weeks out is the right choice, given the interaction we still have to do
Yeah.
with the planning board and and the peer reviewers, so
Be,
maybe we should request,
June 4th would be our,
June
June
4th?
18.
Huh?
18.
June
Not doing
18th.
Summer schedule.
we're not gonna do
Okay.
4th.
June
Okay.
18th.
okay, I guess I would request a continuance to your June 18th meeting.
Okay.
I'll make a
Um,
motion then.
Yep, go ahead.
Cool. I'll make a motion that we continue the hearing for the Riding subdivision until June 18th.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
All those in favor? Okay, thank you very much. Make sure you put it on your calendar. You can always call the office if you're not sure when it is or what time. On continuances, we do not do a specific time. We take all public hearings for the first hearings, usually at 7:15, and you can see there might be one at 7:30. And then after that, we'll just take the continuance based on how many folks are here, so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll be out in the hall if anybody from the neighbors wants to,
And if you do, please,
and yeah, out of earshot down the hall, I should.
correct,
should
thank you
clarify.
so much. Okay, next. Talking about continuances. Okay, so the next one up is gonna be, Church in West Street? Okay, very good. Okay. So here we go. Pursuant to the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, the Grafton Wetlands Protection Bylaw, the Grafton Stormwater Management Bylaw, Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing to act upon notice of intent, application for Grafton Wetlands Protection Bylaw permit, application for Grafton Stormwater Management Bylaw permit, for construction of 57 unit multifamily residential development. Please come on up. As you have done previously.
We have, Madam Chair. Nice to see you folks again. One of the things that, as you recall,
I'm sorry, just for the record.
oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
I've never done that before. This is the first time.
Are you so comfortable here?
Yeah, it's like coming home. Wayne Bellick, WTA Design Group, and I'm here representing David Brossi of Brigati Village LLC. Wow. Rather be here than home, I guess. It's not a good sign. So as we met with you folks last, there were a couple of butters that had gotten up to spoke, one of them being a Tom Winston from 13 West Street. We discussed with the commission the improvements to that area to alleviate some drainage concerns. So as we discussed at the last meeting, we are sensitive to the resource areas and the proximity of the resource areas, not only the existing wetland, but that wetland that was replicated as part of that filing several years ago. So we do know that we're within the 20-foot setback to the resource area, 20 or 25? 25.
25. That's okay.
Foot setback, and I completed a waiver request form, which I just found out is still sitting on my desk underneath the parking lot lights shining in on them. But I did email that to you this afternoon, Leah, so I know you have that. Mr. Brasi has provided a check. And basically, I can't recall the section, but I'm going to give it a shot. It's that section, I want to say it's C5A, that discusses work or the prohibition of work within the 25-foot, basically no disturb zone to a resource area. So we're seeking relief for that. And what we are proposing is, I don't know how you want to address that. I'm on that subject now, so I'd like to, if it's
So we can
okay.
kind of go through that. I mean, I
Sure.
think we've already talked that
Yeah,
about it, and we understand, and I don't think anyone on the commission has an issue with trying to
Right.
fix something on a budding property, so.
yep. And so we are taking that down the street. What this doesn't show yet was the profile in this view here was, I'm sorry, in this view here was the drainage system is designed but wasn't inserted in the profile. But essentially, it's hard to see. But this, not anymore. Thank you, Leah. So basically, what we're looking at is the house in question. It's this area in here. We're picking up that. We're bringing it down the street, connecting into the existing drain manhole. Thank you again, Leah. And this catch basin here and this catch basin here, as I described before, seem to be interconnected. So we're taking those offline and plumbing them into the main trunk line, which will be make for a better system.
And just a question, on DPW is okay with you making those connections and so forth, and they don't have any issues downstream?
In terms of the volume? It's-
Just in general,
Yeah, so it's going there anyway,
right?
as we
And
see it.
Again, I'm just
Yeah.
making sure that.
That's a good
covered.
question, right. So it is going there, and as we discussed at a previous hearing, we do know that there's water coming through the backyards and eventually making it through that
Church and stuff.
quasi drain system that's out there, and then eventually, so everything seems to go down into their street system.
Okay.
When we looked at this, and as I said at the last meeting, we were proposing to put in a drop inlet with a grate and a trash rack on it. We believe
Oh,
that,
at the
inlet.
that head of that pipe,
correct.
yep.
And so it appears that there is some debris that gets in there, though I would question whether or not, even if it weren't clogged, how well that would function just based on the tributary watershed to that area. It is a 10-inch pipe close to the ground, at the ground surface, with not much head. So what we are proposing, as I discussed last time, was that drop inlet where we're able to generate a little bit of head on that. And if you look at the 10-year storm event, the 24-hour, for a 24-hour rainfall, basically an NRCS type analysis of the watershed tribute to that area, that the volume that it's going to be able to take is that of like a 10-year storm event. So I think, considering where they are now, where they get a decent rain, probably not even a one-year event, and everything's going haywire, this is certainly going to be a plus in the area. If we could, Leah, I know that we had spoken about phase lines
Just on one
Sorry.
point of that,
Yep.
trying to accommodate up to a 10-year storm, I think is more than reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was in a really bad condition, then it got marginally better, and this will be a much bigger leap to get that area to drain a little bit better. So I think that's a reasonable, this is an improvement, an off-site improvement. You're not going to be held to DEP standards.
So I do appreciate that, because I looked at a 50-year event.
It's wetlands.
I know, but I just wanted to see what it would take, and it was a 24-inch pipe, and I figured that, the system downstream is,
And it's a wetlands and
Yep.
don't really want to drain it.
Yep.
But you want to make sure you're preventing the
flooding situation.
yeah, the new terminology, the nuisance flooding that is happening everywhere, yes.
So I do appreciate that. Well, speaking of which, now speaking of new things, fairly new for us and much appreciated, Madam Chairman, at that first meeting when you referred to the system as being a gray 90s system. I appreciated the comment. Went ahead, I did reach out to some of my colleagues in the industry and was surprised to see that not many had designed gravelled wetlands. So
Yeah.
so I did. I did, and they're really cool. So
It's, yep.
they're really cool, and very simple. Once you figure it out,
Simple hydraulics.
it is. It is. So I went ahead and designed it. So basically, it's in detail mode. They're detailing it up now,
Yeah.
but it is designed. And what I found was pretty interesting is, like I said, you run HydroCAD through it as long as you have the wet feet and everything, and you've designed for that, and the 4 inches below the existing grade for the drain. Pretty neat concept.
Horizontal filter with a detention basin on top.
It is, and it's awesome. So basically what I've done is, if we could go to the grading and drainage sheet, please. So what I've done is this portion of the basin and meeting the criteria, I have the 2 cells in there, and met the criteria, actually exceeded the criteria of the length to width ratio, put the plumbing underground, maintaining the 15-foot separation between the pipes, have the stand pipes in there, as well as vertical risers. So this portion of the basin is the gravel wetland. This, we're still, again, to the maximum extent practicable for infiltration, especially as we've discussed with these soils. I am taking advantage of this end so that this portion of the basin still has that infiltrative capacity, while this area in here is the gravel wetland. In terms of the water quality volume, the 10, the 45, and the 45, what I've done is I've gone with obviously the 45 the 45 in each of these cells, and had gone with the proprietary units, the storm water treatment units for the 10% in each of the cases, inlet into the basin. So, like I said, really cool design. I will be doing more of these. This is not the last one.
I would only caution
Yep.
is have a lot of conversation with the contractor.
Oh, yeah.
Because even though it's very simple, and even the details are not that elaborate, getting the hydraulics and the pipe elevations are important.
Critical.
But it's a little bit forgiving, but it does need a little attention.
So I appreciate that. That's one of the things, I'm familiar with what you do for work, and I'm sure that you have found that on a number of occasions when you go out and you look at some of the conventional stormwater systems that are constructed, and the compaction that occurs in the bottoms of those systems. It's a nightmare. So what we do is we work with the contractors so that if it is a conventional type system, they're not driving their equipment around on the bottom, that they leave that soil in place until they're ready to finalize the design of the system. When we did Hillview, speaking of which, we had a long swale within one of the stormwater basins. It was interesting because when we went out there to stake and grade it, nobody. So we had to provide them, obviously, with the sketch, which we always do. But the contractor was not happy because he said, basically, what are you doing to me? But when all was said and done, it came out really nice. And it functions well. So with respect to that, thank you for that direction. So we've designed that in terms of the phasing plans. Leah, if you could go to the phasing plan, thank you. So what we've done is we've broken it up into the 2 phases. This phase here, phase 1 is 3.8 acres, 2.8 as discussed at the last meeting. The phase line is basically going to come through here, up and over in here. We did show, Leah, if you could back up to the layout materials plan, there was a request for demarcating on the plan the limit of work. And so that's defined along here with multiple call-outs here, and around the perimeter, calling out the limit of work, which is held at the tree lines and the erosion and sediment control measures. There was a question in the correspondence from Leah to address perhaps some of the comments that had come up at the planning board in some correspondence. One of the things that Joe Layden had requested was some explanation in layman's terms as to what the soil borings meant. So I reached out to Northeast Geotech, Mark Zambernati, who's the PE on the project, and he gave a nice narrative. I believe I forwarded that to you, Leah, so that is part of the public record. If you'd like, I could read through it. If not, we'll do whatever you want.
I'll go to my fellow commissioners. I
Yeah.
kind of get it, so.
Yeah, I know.
So
I
will-
sensed that. And then there was a letter from a Philip Knock, who was in attendance at the planning board meeting, and also at the Concom meetings. And the question had come up with respect to the vernal pools. As the commission recalls, we had your representative from Ecotech, Art Allen, and we had Brian Waterman here, who had gone out to the site and had made some observations in the field as to the proximity of these pools that exhibit the characteristics of a potential vernal pool. And what Brian had discovered was that on the so wetland flag 1, which I believe is, let's see, where is stone wall?
Yeah, right, what would be
Yep.
right in that, whoops.
So
There you go.
down at wetland flag 1, where was that, Leah? Where would that be? That down below?
Right here?
There you go, thank
Yep.
you. Better
Right where
eyes.
right where the culvert is and so
Yep,
forth.
gotta love the young eyes. So, wetland flag 1 in this location, Brian indicated that the pool was 7 feet in from wetland flag 1 in this general area here, which in terms of the limit of work for the project was about 80 feet away. The question that had come up from Mr. Knock was, if I could read
Certainly.
this. He states, I'm in a butter to this project and have some concerns concerning the project. I believe there are some vernal pools on the eastern portion of the property of this project. From the conceptual map, I believe the structures on the southeast end of the property are within the buffer zone. At this point, the pool isn't on their property, but it runs up the property line, and structures are close to the property, well within the 100-foot buffer. So with respect to that, the structures, the building structures, if you look at this dimension here, that's roughly 70 feet. So if we were to try to have an idea, oh, here you go, over 70 feet in here from the 77 feet from the property line to the structure. And then, as Brian said, it was about 80 feet to the limit of clearing, which is about in here. So that is, if that's 80 feet, it's well over 100 feet from this area in here to the structure itself. So we would beg to differ that it's not within 100 feet of that. My understanding, and I'm not sure after I had to run to the other two meetings at the last Concom meeting, whether or not Brian and Art got into buffer zones associated with vernal pools. I recall from years ago that the vernal pool buffer zone, if within a resource area, the limit of the buffer zone goes to the edge of the resource area. If it's not within a resource area, then the buffer zone, I think, Madam Chair, is 100 feet from the actual, no?
It depends upon the local bylaw.
Yep,
Having been involved with some cases,
Mm-hmm.
there isn't a buffer. If it's strictly a vernal pool and it's a habitat,
yep,
you know, there's stuff under the Army Corps, different.
Yep.
So, yeah, under the wetlands, it actually is surprisingly not a lot.
interesting.
A lot of local bylaws
Yep,
do
Trump,
trump that and so forth, and so doesn't you can't fill them in because it's a habitat, but
Yep.
habitats don't have buffer zones.
correct. Okay, thank you very much. I did note that in your wetland regulations, the discussion of vernal pools, talking about, as you did, I think it was one of the first meetings discussing when discussion came out about a wildlife habitat assessment because we're not altering a resource area. We had that discussion. So with respect to that, I believe the vernal pool discussion,
Yeah, from my memory from the last meeting is that although there might be some characteristics, it wouldn't meet the regulatory requirements of a vernal pool based on the observations made. Obviously, there are other vernal pools south of this area, and I think the abutter who actually, where that falls under there, she was very nice, she talked about what her plans are in the future, but she didn't want to have it certified at the time.
right,
It's not on your property. If an abutter came in and asked us to get it certified, would ask you, but that hasn't happened. And we did have our peer reviewer here to discuss and go into a pretty thorough discussion about, yeah, there's some characteristics there, there's definitely some different, there was peepers, and I forget what the other
Mhm.
one was, but.
wood frogs, yep.
Yeah, but it's not, wouldn't meet the regulatory requirements.
Mhm.
And so we rely on our peer reviewer, so he knows a heck of a lot more about this stuff than I do, that's for sure.
Okay.
So, yeah, so that's fine. I think, obviously, you outside of the wetlands on that side, so
Okay.
yes, you're definitely within a 100-foot buffer of the wetlands. But the additional information about the location of that area is appreciated.
All right, thank you very much. The other comment that Mr. Knock had made, the second paragraph, was also at last night's meeting, there was a geologist speaking, and Madam Chair, he's making reference to the planning board hearing. At last night's meeting, there were geologists speaking of stormwater calculations and felt that the miscalculations may have been made concerning the ability of the soil to absorb water. My take from this discussion was the water flows would exceed the design plan's capacities to contain the water in their collection areas. The excess flows would run toward Providence Road, and my concern is that they run into the vernal pools which run the length of Bruce Hollow property. So as we discussed, and as you indicated, it does go out to peer review, and the peer review consultants have been satisfied with the flows off the property that would meet the state's requirements. Thank you.
Yeah, based on kind of our notes here, you're still, based on what you said, you're still kind of finalizing some of your designs.
Yes.
That has to go to Graves.
Yep. And in
Um,
fact, if I could, I did speak with Jeff Walsh last week to ask what his schedule will look like. I told him what our schedule will look like. I just wanted to keep him
Yep.
apprised. And I was hoping to get through them today. I'm very close. So tomorrow they go into review and stamp mode. And are you okay, or are you gonna hit me? You're okay? Okay. So by Thursday, I would imagine that they will be dispersed to the town into Graves Engineering
Okay.
with the updated stormwater
So if we
report.
go 2 weeks from here, okay.
Yep, thanks.
As far as specifically the waiver for the work on the abutters, and I notice here in Leah's report that you do have an agreement with the abutter. Our concern, that agreement is between you and him. The only
Right.
thing that we want to make sure is that you have permission to go on there.
Yeah.
This is something that you're doing to mitigate something off-site, so, it's not really it's part of this notice of intent because it's being included in it. But yeah, so I just want to make sure that we have a copy of it so that
Yep.
when we go ahead, that it is executed. I don't think it needs to be recorded, just it's an agreement between yourselves
Sure,
and the homeowner and your attorneys, making sure that it's the appropriate language and so forth.
sure. Did you want me to draft that up and then get that to you? Or how
Yeah,
do
we
you
can
want to do
talk
that?
about it.
Okay,
So we want a copy of it to make sure
Sure.
that when we put something in the conditions and we say things, everything's shown on the plans, that you have permission to do that. So, and that would be something, if we can have it before we close, great. If not, it'd be something that we would have to have before you started construction.
okay. So, or then you'd make it a condition on your order.
Yep,
So
and
we'll
that's
we'll
fine.
look to try to get that to you
Yeah.
before.
I understand sometimes with agreements, it takes a little while.
Yep.
I'm sure the sequencing of that particular work is probably whatever you guys decide. I just appreciate that you're doing.
Yep, thank you.
So, yeah, we have a couple of waivers that we can do at the next meeting. I don't see any issues with that. I don't know if there's any other questions. You've been going through the process We had some very good dialogue with Art here, and I think the abutters got to hear a little bit an impartial kind of voice about that. So I think, from my perspective, we're just going to wait for the final plans, the final peer review. Is there anything else outstanding there? I kind of read through. It seems like you got your additional $61, or?
Yeah, but I need the waiver one.
Did you get her the $50 waiver one?
Did you get the $50 from the building department today?
Oh, is that what that was? Okay.
Yes, you did get that.
Yep.
It went to Katrina and she didn't know what it was for. Okay.
That's not, but it's not on the check.
All right.
No big deal.
And then obviously we'll wait for those peer review come in. We'll go through and we'll start doing our conditions. Most likely the way we'll do it is probably on a larger project like this, we'll actually close the hearing.
Mhm.
And then what we like to do, if we can, is actually prepare the special conditions send them to you, and then at the following meeting, vote on and finalize it.
Yep.
And we don't do it very often that
Oh,
way.
okay.
The only reason is in case we come up with this brilliant condition and you look at it and say we can't do it.
Yep.
Or you have a different suggestion. Obviously, we can't hear any new information. What we're doing is really trying to work out, we have certain things written in there about the phasing or something like that. It's easier to take care of it through a discussion solely on the conditions on a project this size.
Okay. Well, we do appreciate that, Madam Chair.
And yeah, I'm not going to promise anything as far as the timing of getting those conditions done, but the whole idea is that close it, then we'll go through the conditions. I have a feeling this will have lengthy conditions,
Mhm.
so we want to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yep.
Okay.
Much
So at this
appreciated.
point, if there's anyone here at the public who'd like to come up, talk about, ask any questions, we still have a little bit left to do, but we're getting close to it. But unless you guys have anything else to do, you've asked for continuance to our next meeting, which is the May
21.
May 21st, whatever. Based on that, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we continue the hearing for Brigati Village until May 21st.
Have a second?
I second it.
All those in favor? Thank you very much, and thanks for your hard work.
Terrific.
And
Thank you
you for
very much.
responding to the abutters' comments. I appreciate that.
Thank you. And thanks again. I had, so I'm not going to name the company. They're a bit bigger than WDA is, and apparently, they spoke this week, and one of my colleagues, who I used to work with, is now at this larger company. They had a meeting on drainage, and the gravel wetlands came up. So I had actually reached out to her and asked, because they're a larger company, if they had done them, and she said no. So I said, "You're kidding me." I said, "Could you ask around?" So she asked around in the company, and they hadn't done it. So I just want to let you know that you're.
So just to let you know, we did our first one up in Danvers on a very large vocational
Yep.
school, and we had to because of the conditions. It looks gorgeous.
Oh, I bet.
It's right next to the wetlands. It looks gorgeous.
I
It
bet.
really came out nice. Since then.
He is actually excited about it.
I am.
I know,
Just
but
twisted.
this is,
Yeah.
we get
He
two
called me,
people
he goes, "I
discussing
can't believe I
stormwater
haven't
and
done
two
this
engineers
before."
that are excited about it, yes.
That's great.
It fits into, it's so practical.
It is.
And it's, from an environmental standpoint, because of the wetlands and the fact that you don't have to worry about compaction because of the soil of the filter.
Yep.
And then it's okay because it's a wetland soil, you can, there's a lot of good things that come out of it. The only thing you're gonna have to do is cut it a lot.
Yep. Yep.
But if that's the
Cut
biggest
the
thing,
bottom of the basin?
yeah, every
Yeah.
couple of years.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not bad.
It'll be
Yeah.
dry on foot after
Yeah.
everything drains down because you're 4 inches below.
But yeah,
I think he's excited about it, because like myself,
It's-
when I find something new, it's like, wow,
it's-
this, I
it's
didn't
cool.
know about this,
Yeah.
and that's,
It really is, and
because
that's.
it's new, you just have to, we have had some small issues, depending upon the contractor, but some of them, they pick it right up. I mean, this isn't,
No,
it's
it's-
nothing, it's not rocket
No,
science.
it isn't. It isn't. It's
And,
like, it's almost like a septic system underground with the stone
much.
rather being at the top, or the pipe, it's at the bottom.
It's just a horizontal filter.
Yeah,
And if you ever designed a horizontal filter, that's all it is.
yeah,
So,
really cool.
so that's
So
great.
apparently they discussed it this week, and she said, "Well, I've got a good friend at WDA who's going to get me some details and some plans as a copy." So Dave, just because You just paid somebody's,
Yeah, no, I know.
When you
And
get,
they're
when you
big enough,
get
they
the
can afford to do it
opportunity,
themselves.
go to UNH and do the 2-day class.
sure, yeah,
And They
absolutely.
run it a couple times a year. You definitely,
UNH?
well, UNH is, they now have,
That's my
it's,
son goes, that's why it's sort of funny.
yeah, it's, they actually,
Research.
they've changed the way they do continuing ed up there. It's now a different organization, but they still do the gravel wetlands, not as much as they used to, but yeah. So it's worth understanding the details of it, but it's pretty straightforward, so, very
Much
good.
appreciated. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, it's just awesome. It's great. Like I said, I'm gonna do
Isn't it
this.
sad two engineers getting
Yeah,
freaked
it
out
is.
about
Yeah. So
stormwater?
this is the dialogue I can't have at home. It's like, are you kidding me? Get away from me. It's like,
Yeah.
all right.
Oh,
Thank you
yeah.
very much. You folks have a wonderful night.
You too. Okay. All right, so that's that. So not the last thing, but the next thing. Okay, pursuant to the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, the Grafton Wetlands Protection Bylaw, the Grafton Stormwater Management Bylaw, Conservation Commission will hold public hearing to act upon a notice of intent. Application for Grafton Wetlands Protection Bylaw permit, application for Grafton Stormwater Management Bylaw permit for the expansion of the library at 35 Grafton Commons, so. You're up.
Hello.
Like, you guys,
It's closing the shop.
you can use, if you want, we can bring up,
If you could, that would be very helpful.
Do you want the whole set or the planting plans that are separate? What do you want first?
Let's do, you wanna speak first?
Sure, we can go through the technical stuff and then get into the.
Sure, that would make more sense, I think, rather than starting with the plan. So maybe if we could bring up the whole set
Mhm.
first.
see what happens when you hang out with engineers.
Eric Williamson with CDW Consultants. If you recall from last time, you had a couple comments and questions. Probably the large, oh, sorry, I can sit down. The first one was to do an actual test pit in addition to the boring that was done in the detention basin. So on April 24th, we did a test pit in the corner of the existing parking lot that's kind of just into the detention basin. We observed groundwater weeping into the hole at about 6 feet. Based on those elevations, we did adjust the bottom of the basin, lifting it up a little less than a foot to get it a 2-foot groundwater separation. Because of the loss in volume, because of the rise in the bottom, we had to widen it out a little bit, push it a little closer to the parking lot, and then readjusted our outlet control structure and, updated the drainage calculations. We also changed the side slopes to a 3-to-1 side slope. Some other comments, we had the construction sequence added to the plan to deal with the outlet from the wetland. Adjusted the, yep. Yeah, the sequence is very simplistic. It will have to probably be revisited once a contractor gets on board to make sure he's okay with the sequences. Essentially, we install that first manhole off of Upton Street. Yeah, maybe, I'll come over. So we put in the first manhole here that connects down to the street. Once that in, as they're installing it from the wetland side down, they would be able to, dewater and pump around if they had to. Hopefully they can do it during a period of low flow and there's not much groundwater or need to dewater. Revising some of the plant selections, called out locations of porous pavers, the self-verification form for filling the wetland, which is in this general area, that will be done prior to the start of construction. There's not a contractor on board yet, it's gonna go up for bid. Once that happens, they get the contractor to submit the form.
And then as far as we're concerned, all we want is a copy of that process so we know it's done. We're not gonna review it, it's not our jurisdiction, but we wanna make sure it gets done.
Okay. And then back stormwater basin up here. There's some DEP comments about Bryden Forebay. So this portion of the basin got elongated, and a forebay with a stone check dam right there. And then so the runoff will come this way, dump into the forebay, and then proceed for the rest of it.
How's it going through the curb and what kind of?
It's a flush curb.
Okay, so just be careful of erosion, because I don't care, even if you say that curb is flush and is level, never is. You're gonna be out there doing stone and stuff, but, so there's different ways to handle it. It's just, it's something that we'll look at during construction, but FYI, when you do it never comes up the way you design it.
Yeah, you're building it with, 20-ton machines, so, yeah.
It's yeah.
And I believe that's all the technical questions. Graves had reviewed the resubmission of the plans. With all the issues that Graves had identified have been resolved. I think the only thing is one comment by Art Allen about the plant selection in the replication area. Turn it over to you.
Sure. So first I should say that we just recently heard back comments from Art on plant selection. So, Leah, do you actually have the two separate
Yep.
insights? Great, thank you. So,
Is there a particular area you want me to zoom in on?
well, so we have two options. First, I'll say they're largely similar, and so I'm just going to point out the differences. This is what we're labeling option A, which is an option that we are preferring, and this option we are asking for a waiver of continuing this porous paved pathway from a children's story area. This is basically access to a boiler room and sort of some mechanical space, so this is not a widely used space. Currently, this is paved asphalt up until this patio space with concrete block seating as it slopes upward towards the commons. This would be all porous paving, connects to a children's program room here, and then this connects back to the main patio that is off of kind of the main primary program room in the library, which then wraps back over to the parking lot and to the new entrance of the space. So all this is currently proposed to be porous pavers, and then the vegetation that's in the planters adjacent to the building are using a series of different wetland species. And what is consistent in both plans, the alternative locations for the wetland replication areas are this area and this area, both total 730 feet per the size of the existing isolated wetland. And what we're proposing to do is having a series of wetland shrubs along the embankment here, and then in the area that will be disturbed, temporarily disturbed while plants are being installed and soils are being relocated into this area for replication, that this area would be reseeded all with a wetland conservation mix, essentially, from New England wetland plants, so that there'd be a diversity of species that would come back in and fill this area in, and allow a large, about a dozen species mix to kind of populate this and add greater diversity through this area and fill that in. So that's what's the large difference is this section through here, and the second plan. Actually, if we could bring that up just so that we can point that out. Thank you. So the second option B, and what we had shown at our previous hearing, there was a dashed path showing option A as a kind of a dash location. And this was showing that only the patios were done with pavers, and then this was a concrete, cast-in-place concrete pathway that would then connect up to the commons. So we would prefer the path to be able to connect these two patios together and also allow for egress from the children's space to empty into the parking lot versus empty up into the common space. We realize that in the other option, we're cutting through the 25-foot no-build zone, and so we're hoping that what we're offering in exchange for a waiver is sufficient to kind of strengthen and enhance the wetlands in that area in between the wetland replication location and the disturbed soils within that 25-foot buffer. So we are ultimately preferring to ask for option A for that location. I think there's greater continuity for library function and that it would be sufficient for
Can you
this area.
go back to option
Mhm.
A real quick? So basically, can you zoom into the 25-foot line? So basically, it's the dash line right there. What's this? So this is a large scale. So this is,
That's the 25
Right, that's the 25-foot.
Yeah, so it's a-
line through
okay.
here. So this is roughly 226 feet of pathway, square feet of pathway that would be within that space.
so the area that you're gonna do with the wetland mix or a wildlife mix, what's the long-term kind of maintenance of that? Are you intending to keep it as a meadow, or what is the intention of that area, and how we know it's gonna be maintained?
So it would be maintained to remove invasive species by the library. And the idea with it is if some version of succession is going to occur, that's just fine.
Okay.
There's no program space to occur in that area, but there's no large mandate to
Yeah.
mow it and keep it as a
And that's
meadow.
kind of the key question is what is that space gonna be like, not just the year after you seed it,
Sure.
but are you gonna let it just kinda, for lack of succession, creep back in? And I just wanna make sure it's clear that, that if we, look at this and say, yes, we're gonna go ahead with this, that there's a plan there of what the library's gonna do in that area. Right now, it's full of
That would-
invasives and,
Sure.
yeah.
The area is disturbed
Yep.
to a fair degree by a series of invasives. So I think it's fair that we, that would be a condition within this.
Yeah.
But largely, we're looking for some balance between very low maintenance and benign neglect, so to speak, which would be to let it run its course except for where a series of invasives, multiflora rose and,
Yeah,
et
I mean, you
cetera,
could
that would
do-
start to recruit in. We'd like to see that be maintained to removed.
Yeah.
But we're not really proposing there be large maintenance that would happen.
No, I'm thinking more of like a yearly or every other year,
Sure.
cutting it down to get rid of the woody species and or any other invasives or whatever, but that's kinda, I mean, it's, I don't have a great thought one way or the other than the fact that, it can't suddenly become part of the program space.
Right, that part I
And
understand.
one of the things that we'll probably do is to have, we have a standard, condition where we do 4x4 signs.
Okay.
And if you guys wanna do some sort of different sign, that's fine by me, but we have a standard of what's there. It basically says that this is, a no disturbance area, and it's just a notification of saying, it could potentially be an educational component, but, for our perspective, we don't wanna all of a sudden see picnic tables there.
Right, that's,
That's
Very
really
fair
what it
request.
comes down.
and it's a fair request, I think certainly to put in signs, because we would like to be able to promote a greater view into a wetland rather than into an area that's highly disturbed by a series of invasives and vines.
Yeah, we might, you could even do, a sign that, this will be a no disturb, but you could even do a sign that says, invasive species removal area, help us, maintain them.
Sure.
I mean, that's more on your side, and on the program side, on kind of educational side, as opposed to us making you do that.
Well, and it seems, I would say that it seems fair, given the library director has expressed enthusiasm for local and native vegetation surrounding the library. There's a planting bed on the other north side of the library that they currently have, they'd like to continue to have, which is a series of raised beds for vegetables and wildflowers. And so there's there's an idea of being able to integrate some planting and kind of vegetation programming within the library. So having invasive species removal component with
Yeah.
volunteers is great.
So, what is the rest of the commissioners? So basically, we have a request in front of us to waive our, kind of, 25-foot no disturbance. And no matter what is being done to do the replication areas, you have to disturb it. So it's already altered. So the part that we're granting the waiver for is the path that kind of cuts through. You can see where the 25-footer is. So you're taking off that corner. I mean, the 25-footer is like, what, a foot off of the corner of the building?
Something like that, yeah.
So, I mean, the whole idea is, and what we talked about last time is, you know, give us a reason to, you know, every request for a waiver to me is independent and is site-specific, and to me, there has to be some sort of enhancement to the protection of the wetlands to waive it. And so that's that's the question in front of us, if we think this is something that warrants, I mean, I look at the two options. This makes more sense from a program point for the library. I understand that, but it is part of our regulations, and if we're gonna waive it, we need to have a better reason just because it works for the program.
So on the other plan, there is no connection between that main patio and then this, whatever we're calling the,
This is a children's patio. 'cause
Children's
it
patio,
Essentially
okay.
connects to the children's program space within the library.
okay, so I'm not a real big fan of the sidewalk going to the front either. It just seems like-
That's the other thing, that was, yeah.
It seems like besides just being concrete, but just kind of an invitation where people just walk off the street and all of a sudden be in the children's area, which,
Also correct.
so I do like the plan you're proposing, despite, you know, it's in the wetlands, or
Or
not
disturbed.
in the disturbance area.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say that we will probably wanna put, in is that wintertime, you can't use salt back there on the sidewalk. We're
Good
talking
call.
about something, because that'll just drain right into the wetlands.
Mhm.
So, you know, obviously, we'll need to shovel it, and hopefully not too many people are gonna be out there in the snow, running around. But I think.
That's actually one thing the porous system will probably, I mean, it's
Improve it,
it's
but-
pavers with a joint in it. Is that
Yeah.
the type of system that you're doing?
That's exactly
That's,
what we want.
that is actually more prone to ice up,
Yeah.
just because you have the solid surfaces. If you went with a pure porous like pavement or a porous paver, and I'm not suggesting you do that, you would have almost no issues with icing. Unless it is the north side, is it? Which way is north?
It's actually, yes, this is the south side, so this
Oh,
is-
okay, so then you must you're more likely to get the sun to, you know, as far as, even porous pavement on a shady north side, you can get icing.
Mhm.
But,
That seems like a very reasonable condition, certainly, and,
yeah,
say no salt.
Otherwise, I think it connects it much better. I think it's safer than going in and out, and
it's an education component. And instead of hiding the wetlands, you're embracing it. I mean, if this was pristine wetlands that had never been disturbed, we'd be having a different conversation. It's already altered, it's already got little fill piles back there and everything else, so, overall, there's a significant improvement to the area abutting it, to the no disturb area, so. Do you have any kind of questions, or?
No, I question, I mean, for liability purposes, would people be even out there in the winter months anyways?
Right, I mean, that
You know.
to me is an operational thing the
Yeah.
library has to deal
Right.
with, but I think it's a good suggestion about the de-icing. Okay,
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine there's any children's programs out there in the winter.
I wouldn't.
But I would imagine the library would still want for
Oh,
just
sure.
fire safety, just
Yep.
to be allowed repairs to occur.
still need to shovel.
There is one other space that you guys had brought up at our last hearing, which was for the stormwater basin on the west side of the library. Just have to remind myself, when the plans are orientation is upside down. The previous plans were calling the basin here, we were just speccing that with Carrick Stricta, and you keenly pointed out that may not work very well if this was about 4 feet above the water line. With the new with the test pits that were dug, we found that actually the water line's a little bit higher than 4 feet, so it's a little closer to the bottom, but nonetheless, changed what was called out for, instead of Carrick stricta and just a little blue stem, Schizachyrium, we're adding just a greater diversity and integrating it with the same mix that we'd be using here, we would be using in the basement and in the basin, and then along the new 3-to-1 slopes, we'd be putting in a conservation wildflower wildlife mix. So they're slightly different mixes. They're listed at the top of the plan, but the ones in the basement take their moisture conditions, and the ones that are on the embankment. And it seems like it's a safe bet when there's a greater species mix.
It's 15, 20 different, yeah.
So there's going to be, things are going to take a different elevation and kind of naturally populate into zones that they are going to prefer, where precipitation is happening, and also it's just going to add for just an aesthetic, kind of prettier space. We would propose for that area that it would be, again, something that would be maybe, again, do an annual maintenance.
Yeah,
once a year.
which totally makes sense. That should be in your O&M. I mean, that should just be part of the O&M as, yearly mowing and that just prevents woody plants from getting in there. The other thing that, with the basin, when it's gonna be all disturbed and so forth, you might be fighting invasives. I don't have a good suggestion other than,
Yeah, no labor.
try to keep ahead of it and,
That's something we can bring up with the library director about integrating,
Yep.
have a volunteer core that can.
Yeah, the good thing with those seed mixes, there's both annual, perennial, and so hopefully the annual takes hold before you get the invasives in there, but it's just, I don't have a good, and I'm not gonna do a condition on something that is hard to, enforce. I mean, it's hard if you already have invasives in the area, so, okay, any other questions? There's no one in the audience, so no questions from the public. Anything outstanding? It seems like the test pits were done. Graves is pretty much all set. We saw the 2 alternatives. We'll talk about that in a minute. DEP's file number, basically the 5-foot is gone because they now have a 4-bay in there. So those have all been kind of taken care of. Trying to think what else.
If you flip it over, there's more points on the
Yeah,
back.
I'm reading him now as far
Okay.
as the NOI form for impact resource area needs to be updated. Or is that-
Yeah, so when Art had pointed out that the wetland to be filled is actually isolated, I think you need to go back and revise the numbers that you list out on the NOI, because it was listed as BVW,
Okay.
so we just need to
it's- yeah,
change
you wanna
that.
Yep. So as far as the sequencing of the replacement for the outlet structure, you talked a little bit about that. I would propose a condition that we include a sequencing plan from the contractor once they're hired. So that should be submitted prior to construction beginning. I understand you can put a sequencing plan together. This is a public bid project, so you need to get it. It needs to be in your spec, the requirement, and we needs to be submitted as a submittal and needs to come to us before that work is done. We need a copy of the self-verification form for the filling of the wetlands from Army Corps. And again, we're not gonna be reviewing it. It's just really have a copy so that we know that it's been done. Then as far as signs, we will require standard signs. It won't be placed on the 25-foot line. It'll be placed on the back of the walkway that goes through there. Also, a condition about no salting in that area, plus you don't want to salt a porous system anyways. Did I miss something? And we still have to do the waiver discussion, but that's I'm just trying to go through all my notes.
You got these other ones, metal debris.
Oh, yeah, that was, we had talked about that last time.
Yeah, that's in the further south replication area, I believe.
Right. That was in that next nearest to the
That
property line.
fill pile, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So there was the comment that they referred to earlier that we just got from Art was, about the plant types.
Yeah, yes, I was gonna put a note in there, is, submit a new plant list. And to be reviewed by Art, just to conform it, so we can close. I don't think we wanna continue a hearing based on correspondence that's already gone back and forth, and Art's already commented on it, so it's not like we don't know what we are looking for,
Okay.
That would be appreciated if that was a condition.
okay? So we're all set on the replication because it replicating that isolated area, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. The waiver request, we'll talk about that. Already talked about that, and that, okay. And then as part of the construction sequencing plan for the outlet structure replacement, we're gonna have in there that has to be done during the dry season. Okay.
Has there been any additional communication with DPW about the porous pavement? Because I know they previously were not in favor.
No?
This is, but the porous pavement is only that walkway, correct? They're not gonna have to maintain it.
Okay.
No, I mean, that's whoever it is shoveling, it's not no, I get, they're probably not, the problem with DPW is the potential of spending money to do a porous parking lot and then having someone salt it and sand it and then destroy the capacity of that infiltration. And then, yeah, I mean, it's no different maintenance of plowing or anything else, but I would just say, I don't know what DPW has, but this is a walkway that the library is gonna maintain. And we already said, no de-icing, so you're not gonna be doing stuff out there. Okay. All right, back to, option A, option B. So, as far as the commission goes, is there enough benefit to the wetlands and the no disturb zone? Even though part of it's, with that, porous walkway, porous paver system walkway, is that sufficient enough to say, yes, we should do it? It's time to kind of voice if you wanna go it, otherwise, it's looking at option B.
I'm in favor of option A.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't all disturbed, I'd have a different
Mhm.
opinion. It's site-specific.
yeah.
Okay. So, first thing is, so let's have a motion to, waive, the 25-foot, no disturb, and just have a finding, that the only reason we're doing it is that it's already, the findings would be, it's already altered and already disturbed, and that the enhancements of the replication area and the enhancement of the plantings within the, no disturb zone is a benefit, which is the reasons why we're doing that.
I'll make a motion that we approve a waiver requested for the 25-foot no disturb zone. So stated as the reasons why.
That works for me. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
You do.
All those in favor? Okay,
Yep.
so that's step one. Your waiver's been granted. So we are going option A. Obviously, when you list your plans, yeah, you know how to do it. You know better than I do, so that's good. Okay, now comes the fun one with all of the conditions we just talked about. Just so that you all know what's coming and that we vote on it. There's a whole list of standard conditions that are boilerplate from DEP. We also have our own local kind of standards. The sign is one of them, but we're gonna alter that a little bit because it's not, because usually we put it at the 25 foot of the limit of work. This is gonna kind of go behind the walkway. Anyone willing to,
Sure.
okay,
I will make a motion for 35 Grafton Common for the town of Grafton with the following, let's make a motion to close the hearing with the following special conditions. We will need a revised sequencing plan from the contractor once that person or company has been hired. Must be submitted prior to starting any construction. The work must be done, replacement of the outlet structure shall be done during the dry season. We will require implementation of our standard signs with the so stated alterations around the walkway. No salt should be used during the cold season, winter season, for the purpose of de-icing. We must have submit a revised plant list for peer review. All metal debris near the wetland flag A5 shall be removed, and a self-verification form from the Army Corps shall be filed prior to commencement of work with a copy submitted to the commission. I think that's it.
I got
I
all
have
my checks off. Do we miss anything?
Couple questions.
Absolutely. That's why you're there.
Do we need to add anything about managing invasives and how often to mow things?
Good questions, and the answer is yes, we do have to address both of those. So, as far as invasive, I would say that, as part of the operation and maintenance plan, that, a part of it needs, a section needs to be added for ongoing invasive removal plan. There are some standard ones out there. I would, it's gonna be very labor intensive, and it's trying to keep up with it, especially in the new application area and the new no disturb zone. Okay, so that's, so Scott had made a motion, it was put forward. We're now amending that motion to add one, the O&M plan for invasives, and the second one was?
Mowing, and I have one other one, which was revising the sheet in the
Okay.
NOI.
So then, as part of the O&M, which is a continuation of the First Amendment, is to add in the actual operation and maintenance of that no disturb, and the detention basin, which should already be in there, as far as mowing it on an annual or semi-annual basis, every year or every other year, depending upon the growth. And then
The
the
NOI
last
form.
one is, the last
Yep.
amendment would
Would
be.
be the revision of the NOI form for the calculations for the impacted resource areas.
Okay, so we have a motion, amend it. Any additional?
Nope.
Any questions from you guys? Okay. Okay, and then, so now, do I have a second on it?
I second it.
Any further discussion? I'm seeing none.
Yep.
All those in favor?
All right.
Good luck. If the contractor does a nice job, it'll look really nice. So hopefully that's what happens.
And our piece of what Art is pointing out for this area, shrub swamp versus it being a seasonal depression with the cottonbush that are here. I'm gonna just add a series of shrubs ultimately, that'll come in so that the seeding will take a base and then, to erosion, these areas will be filled in, which will help create an nice aesthetic as well, so for.
Yeah, and basically, the way the condition is you'll do an updated plant list, you'll send it to Art, Art will have kind of final say on it, so.
Great.
Yeah, in that case, I'll leave it between you guys to work
Sure.
it out, and then we'll get a final thing, it's part of the condition.
That sounds great, thank
Okay,
you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, alrighty. So let's move on to action items. All right, any particular order, just start from the top?
Yeah, the top's fine.
Okay, meeting minutes.
No comments.
No
Look good from the
comments.
video.
That's great. That's probably actually a better perspective instead.
Read along with it.
Yep. Any other comments or questions on that? Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes from April 16th, 2019.
Second.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Request for certificate of compliance.
Yep. We have two of them. 121 North Street, we had a filing. They are going to be submitting 2 new filings for the same property to be on our June meeting, so they're just looking to close out this old one, saying it didn't commence.
Okay, and how old is the old one?
Not very, like maybe last year.
Yeah, I thought that was, okay, that's fine.
They're
Wow.
now subdividing the lot.
Okay, so it doesn't, that's
Right.
fine.
And this is the one with the big space behind it. Is that the same on North Street?
I don't remember.
There's
I
like
can pull it up.
4 properties in the front. Or is that a different one? Maybe I'm thinking of.
Right by the pike.
Okay.
No,
Oh,
okay,
I
this is
know.
a different one.
Yeah, that's right. That's,
That's the
Oh.
old stone garage.
that is all
Yes.
falling
Falling
apart.
apart,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's the one.
Okay.
Good. I'd like to see that one. They came to us like right when I first started. That was one of the ones that we.
I mean, it's in the 900s. We're still in the 900s for file
Yeah,
numbers,
okay.
so.
All right, so do I have a motion that we close it because it's not being done?
Yes, I'll make a motion that we close and issue a certificate of compliance for 121 North Street.
Second,
I second it.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Adams Road.
Yes, this was a septic installation. We got an as-built plan from them. And I also confirmed with the engineer that grass is growing and everything is stable.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we issue a certificate of compliance for 97 Adams Road.
Second,
I second it.
all those in favor? Unanimous. Elm Rock Estates, construction management plan.
Yes. So Elm Rock is a 40B. They submitted their construction management plan to the ZBA.
Which one is that? Is that the,
It's the one that the road is Deborah Jean.
okay.
One by Eckball Landing, right? Is that the one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
up the
just up the
hill
street.
from Eckball Landing.
Yeah.
So the ZBA requires sign off from various departments on the construction management plan. I went through it and nothing in it contradicts what's in our order. It just doesn't get as detailed as our order does. For example, they don't talk about like inspecting the erosion control, things like that.
Yep.
I didn't know if it needed to. I mean, our order stands regardless.
I think it's fine, yep.
Okay,
I'd rather rely on our order for our stuff.
Yeah.
Anyways.
okay. So, should we vote to give
Okay.
our sign off?
Sure, we have a motion to,
I'll make a motion to, what are we gonna do? I guess to sign off on the management plan for the ZBA for Elm Rock Estates.
second.
I second it.
All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, discussion items. We already talked about Adams Road. Notice of intent to remove land from chapter 61, 43, and 44 Estabrook.
Yep. These were previously before us to have permitting for solar arrays.
Okay,
There's already 2 arrays at 43.
Yep.
They're gonna add another one, and they're gonna add one across the street at 44, but first they have to try to take it out of chapter land. So this is 44, and this is 43.
These are the guys that we're also gonna do the farm, right? These are
Yes.
elevated.
Yep,
Is this Knowlton's?
correct.
yeah, and actually those were pretty cool. They were gonna do
Yeah.
one with farming underneath it,
Right.
with doing cattle, and the other one with actually growing, which I thought was kinda cool.
Yeah, that was neat.
So you can see the arrays that are out there now.
Hmm.
They came before us to put another one, I believe, down here and one across the street. So I just made some notes about them. They are within the ACEC. There's 2 potential vernal pools on 44, and 44 abuts our Merriam Road Conservation Area.
Okay. I mean, I don't see any issues. I mean, I don't, is this on any of the open space lists to get, or?
I'll have to check on that.
Is there any, I mean, I think, I know that CPC's using the money to go for those other couple
yeah.
lots and stuff, so.
I haven't heard of anything to do like an interdepartmental meeting on it. I don't know if they're intending to,
Okay.
so we can
I would,
table
I would
it.
just, I would just ask and see, because, I mean, I don't see, I mean, I don't think the proposed uses are terrible, so. I mean, it's gonna stay, in agricultural, it's just gonna be different, it's, yeah.
I agree.
Okay, so yeah, if you could just make sure that there's nothing else being talked about, or if there's no other meetings, otherwise I think we'll probably, you understand the process that we're going through? If it comes out of 61A, do you know what 61A is?
Yeah, I
Okay.
do.
Cool, then,
I
all right.
very well know. what it
Yes,
is.
that's, I'm just asking, yep,
Okay.
yep, just so that, yeah,
Took me a year to figure that out.
yeah. I've just
So
worked
we'll
on too many
actually take a
subdivisions.
vote on it next time.
Yes.
Okay.
216 Upton Street?
Yep. So this is across from Silver Lake. Leah asked me to go out and see it and do a site visit, which I did, I don't know, it was probably, what, 3 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago? The
Yeah.
first time?
About that.
He came before us about redoing a house, this property, the owner of
Oh,
this
yep.
property. The owner I spoke to that day, I believe lives right there, yep,
Yeah.
north of that, and was concerned that there was a lot of clearing of trees going on the north end, which bordered his property. There's no wetlands on the property. It's across the street from the lake. He was a little bit concerned because, oh, it's cutting down on my privacy. I said,
That's, yeah,
Well,
that's
you know.
okay, yep.
he's got, it's in his right to cut down those trees. From what I saw, it was all within his property, so that part looked okay.
Yeah.
However, looking at the rest of the property, there was no, straw bales were not set up anywhere where they were, well, there weren't any. Do you have the map of where it was supposed to be?
The plan?
Yeah.
I don't know if I put that in Dropbox.
Okay.
I did not, but I have your photos, if that's at
Oh,
all
right.
helpful.
So I didn't have any of it up. It included, there's the footprint of the house that he's trying to rebuild is still there. It looks in pretty bad shape. I'm assuming they're gonna take that down.
Is this one, of the- is it just, I can't remember, I sort of remember this one. Was this a fire one, or was this
I don't think it was a fire.
don't
It's
think
definitely
so.
Old.
just an old?
Yeah.
Is this the house that is, they have all kinds of
Stuff.
stuff, green, like insulation outside that they-
Yeah.
And then the person that you were talking to lives beyond that, or?
Well, the person I spoke to is in that blue area. He's the neighbor.
Yeah,
So I didn't actually speak to anybody. There was nobody there when I went, the 2 times I was there. So behind this footprint of the house that you see there to the west, there were cars, almost like a temporary trailer type, a lot of stuff, which obviously
So they're
somebody's using
redoing
it.
the house.
So, which is redoing the house. They were using a path, though, to get to that, back, kind of goes uphill. You can see that bottom picture on the right, kind of this path that was supposed to be bordered off with
bales of hay.
yeah, the straw bales.
Right, yeah, we don't do straw bales. We don't do hay bales because of invasives. Just think about how hay is created,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
yeah.
that's so FYI on that.
Yep.
But
So, and part of it on the left side of the driveway, I think it was one of the earlier pictures I took, it drains down to the wetlands if you're looking at the house, the
Yeah.
wetlands are to the left,
Yep.
down a little bit. So a lot of stuff was running off. It's a gravel, dirt driveway that was running, definitely
Towards it,
running
okay.
off into the wetlands.
And that's got a little, that wetland you're referring to is that, it's like a little pond that separates,
Mhm.
that 140 goes right, it's not even a pond, it's like a little
Yeah.
tidal pool.
Yeah, it's not, definitely not big, not too deep.
Yeah,
Yeah, so stuff was definitely draining into there. So I took those, and then I went back last week. I was actually riding, so I didn't have my phone to take pictures, but all the straw bales were back up. So, and they looked to be in the correct places. So,
Okay.
but as far as the complaint, with the trees cut down, I didn't see anything that was wrong with it. So,
Okay, and that's more of a civil matter
Yeah.
than us, yep. Okay. Alrighty, thanks for the update. Anything else?
That's all I have.
That's it?
I will make a motion that we close this meeting.
Do I have a second?
I seconded.
All those in favor say yay. Yay, okay.